Edwin, good to see you. Thanks for
Good
making
to see you.
time to come and have a chat. Always appreciate that. Um, I wanted to kick off by asking you about something that we spoke about a little while ago. You said to me, I've hired $1 million team. How did you do that? Just
Yeah,
talk us through that, because that sounds like a phenomenal thing to be able to do.
yeah. And the beautiful thing is I didn't have to spend $1 million, right? So I think that's as a small business owner, what you're always trying to do is you're trying to get absolutely the best talent possible. You want to keep them, make them happy, but you also want to make sure that you're being as efficient as possible as a business owner. So for what we do, when I started the company in 2017, I had this dream, a vision, right? And it really came down to a book that I read called Remote. This is by the founder of Basecamp, and he was espousing the benefits of a globally connected, remotely distributed team. And I read that book and I was thinking to myself, man, I really want that. I would love to have people from all walks of life, people from any country, any sort of culture banding together to do great work. And then before COVID, it wasn't as common as it is now, right? Like when I told people, we didn't have an office, everything's remote, I got a lot of like, oh, holy moly, I can't believe you're doing that, right? And now it obviously is almost like table stakes. It's quite normal. But in the process of doing so, we've really refined our process for finding, training, and keeping really exceptional talent. And that's kind of what I call the $1 million team. Really, really talented, hardworking. Is they I would put them up against anybody,
Yeah.
right? And really, our philosophy is no matter who you are, where you are, we want to hire the best of the best,
Yeah. And
right?
I'm a great believer in that. I mean, hire good people seems to me to be a pretty good strategy for building a business. I mean, let's just explore why that matters, though. So,
Mm.
I mean, what is it you're trying to do with your business? I mean, just talk us through that. And why is it that $1 million team is so important to you in given what you do?
Yeah, a couple of reasons. I think the first reason is that as an owner, you want high talent density, right? That means people, whether they have skills in graphic design or marketing or operations, you want that talent density to be really high. So when you mix them all together, great things tend to happen, right? Great things tend to happen organically without your push or your pull or you forcing it to happen. If the talent density is high enough, good work tends to be born out of that, right? So that's number one. I think number two, what's really critical is good talent likes to work with good talent. So if you have really exceptional individuals and they kind of look around and they don't see other equally exceptional individuals, then they start to ask themselves a question like, oh, why am I here? Right? Like you're spending more time with your coworkers in some instances than your friends and family. So you want to make sure that you're inspired and you're working well together, right? When it comes down to how much time you spend with your fellow team members, right? And then last but not least, I think one of the most important things to do as a leader is knowing when to get out of the way, right? So I would almost always by default love to kind of get out of the way and make sure that people, obviously they need guidance, they need guidelines, they need things like that. But you generally want them to express themselves in their work with the freedom. And really, the best quality work when it comes down to just freedom is making sure that your team is highly skilled, highly creative, and highly capable, right? Especially in this environment where, as digital marketers, the environment is changing quite literally every hour, right? So if you're not on top of that, then you can quickly get left behind. So it's really critical for us to have individuals who are naturally inclined to be on top of that.
Yeah. And I mean, you mentioned digital marketing. I mean, that seems to me to be an area that is changing really quickly.
Yes.
I mean, just tell us about what's happening in that world at the moment. Because I mean, AI appeared, 18 months, 2 years ago. It's starting to change a lot of stuff in that world. I mean, what's your take on how that's evolving?
Yeah. I would say that in general, AI is a human accelerant, right? So if you take, we are in digital marketing, right? So there's many aspects in digital marketing that I think will never or will be very difficult to be replaced with AI, right? Strategy, taste making, understanding the business in and out of your clients and knowing what their challenges are, both financial and otherwise, and then being really creative and addressing that. We want to maximize our team's capabilities and time and bandwidth in addressing the human elements. And then we want to minimize the things that could be addressed with AI, right? So AI could handle a lot of rote tasks that, before in the past would be done manually, and now it can be done automatically, right? I use an analogy really often is when we are marketing for our clients, we're trying to build and grow the best garden possible for them, right? We want a beautiful garden. We want great growth. We want great margins. And there's a lot of things you have to do to maintain a good garden, right? You have to pull the weeds every so often. You have to water every so often. You have to apply fertilizer. So a lot of those tasks, right? We want to automate with AI or have AI play a huge hand in that. So then our team can focus on the landscaping, the design of the garden, right? How it intermingles with like other gardens around it, right? So like all these things I think are really critical. I think that's one big piece of it. The second big piece of it is I think it's going to be harder to stand out.
Yeah.
Right? In this day and age where content can now be created with a single click, I think it's critical to have whatever you put out be even higher in terms of bar quality and to stand out even more and to have a reason to exist, right? There's a lot of AI slop, I call it, out there, right? So there's a lot of content out there that doesn't really have a reason to exist. So I want my team to be focused on, okay, in this age of 10,000 or 100,000 AI generated pieces of content, whether it be image, video, or text, what are we producing to be above and beyond that, where they're scrolling on their phone, they look at our content, they go, oh, holy moly, I'm going to stop the scroll because I'm really interested in this. And it looks very authentic, right? It looks like something that obviously there's a brand being built behind it, right? So I think reputation, trust, and quality have all tripled in its importance.
Yeah. Let me ask you about the quality piece, right? Because it's very, I mean, the thing about design, thing about visual things is that if you like, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. I mean, people look
Yes.
either like it. I mean, taste has a big impact on whether you
Yeah.
click on the link. Is that something that interests me? It's very difficult to predict, I think. I mean, how do you define quality
Hmm.
in that environment when, I mean, I've heard a lot of people talk about AI slop. I've heard quite a lot about that. I'm never sure when I look at stuff whether it's AI generated or developed, put together by a designer. I mean, there was this interesting thing in the UK a little while ago by one of the fashion brands, and they sort of put out this model. I
Mm.
didn't realise that she was AI generated. I mean, I saw the advert, same as everybody else did on TV, I think. And I didn't realise that it was AI generated. I mean, how do you create quality in that environment when it's actually quite difficult to separate out the real from the fake, if you like?
Yeah, yeah. I think there's two-part answer to that question, right? I think the first part is go back to the 1950s and 1960s, right? Go and look at the marketing agencies that were doing really well on Madison Avenue in New York. What did they care about when they were creating a magazine ad or radio ad or a billboard ad, right? They probably all got together in a room and they asked themselves a few questions. Who are we talking to? What do they care about? And how can we make them react and remember our ads? And those tenants, they had to be extremely strong at those because there was no measurement back then. There
Yeah.
was very little measurement, right? There was not this plethora of data where they can click on something and say, oh, I got this click-through rate and I see this, right? So they had to really think about who they're talking to and how are they going to get a reaction from who they're talking to in a way where they're going to remember the brand. So I think it's going to come full circle where a lot of our conversations are going back to that.
And let me
What is the,
let me just sorry,
yeah,
let me just ask you about that. I was watching Mad Men the other night. You know the TV series about Madison.
absolutely. I love that
And
series.
there's a lovely bit in the first series. I think it's the first episode actually, where he's actually talking to people that are trying to sell tobacco. I think or sell. It's one of the cigarette firms, and he makes a really interesting point. He says advertising is about making people feel good. I mean, do you subscribe to that? Is that one of the things that's in the heart of it? Is that you look at something and it makes you feel good? Is that what's going on there?
100%. We're not selling products or services. We're selling emotion. So the best ads sell some sort of emotion, whether it be standing out, whether it be independence, whether it be protection from fear, whether it be protection from worry. All of those things, if you do really well with your creative, whether it be AI creative or not AI created, as long as you're selling some sort of emotion, then that ad is probably going to do well, right? So we are completely subscribed to that. And then different personas and individuals are going to have different emotions that they purchase from a brand, right? So I think that's number one, right? Like that's a really big part of it. Second part of it is that you notice that I said brand, right? So I think every brand needs to be building its brand identity and emotional portfolio in order to succeed in this next
What do
two
you
to three
mean by
years.
what do you mean by emotional portfolio? I mean, just tell me about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you look at the best brands on earth, right? So if you look at a Nike or you look at an Apple, obviously they sell a ton of products, but all their products are incredibly diverse, right? Nike could sell shoes, they could sell hoodies, they could sell a ball. But at the end of it, there's this primary tenet of brand identity where if you put that brand on your head or you put it on your feet, then it stands for something, right? And it doesn't have to be as grandiose as Nike, but it needs to be consistent. Whatever your message is, right? It needs to be consistent across every single touch point you have because that consistency cannot be AI'd out by your competitor, right? So if you have a brand and for 8 years you've been consistent about selling, I'm going to make this up. Let's say you're in food and beverage and you have this great family story about how this particular food kind of helped your family and now you're sharing that to the world, right? And you've been consistent with messaging that for 8 years, and that's part of your brand emotion and brand identity, then your direct competitor who just started last month, they have this huge moat that even with all the AI capabilities, they cannot catch up to you, right? They're going to take 7 to 8 years to catch up to you if they do it right, right? So in this age, again, of when you could generate a brand with one click, how authentic are you and how consistent are you in actually living out and messaging that brand to your customers, that emotion and that story, right? So I think that would help protect you against any sort of Me Too competitors that crop up, especially nowadays where you can, create a product, you click on something, it creates a site, and then, you automate that whole process is it could be highly inauthentic, and then customers can see and feel that.
Let me ask you a practical question. I mean, just to illustrate the point that you've made, because I think you've
Sure.
hit something on the head there. You've hit the nail on the head there.
Yeah.
Just explain how have you approached that for your agency, for Jetfuel agency? I mean, how have you done that? I mean, I'm thinking of a practical example so it helps people make sense of how that works.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So I'll get really tactical, right? So let's say we have a brand, right? Let's say they're onboarding. Typically, what a brand will do is that they'll have what they call a brand guide, a style guide, and there's almost always a founding story, right? Why was the brand started? What was the mission of the brand when it started? Okay. So we take all of those pieces and then we mine through that material and we have some initial thoughts on where we can go with the brand. Then we go, and this is actually where AI comes in.
Mhm.
We go and we start mining customer sentiment. So we actually have a full-time developer in-house, and he has built this platform where he can go press a button and then we mine the reviews of this brand plus all of their direct competitors. And one of the most important things that I look at is I look at all the 5-star reviews for our client, and we, with the same AI tool, it'll tell you all the themes that it reads. It's like,
Right.
oh, people love the taste, people love the texture, right? Then I go into the competitor data set and I mine all their 1-star reviews. And they're like, oh, it's poor value for the price. It tastes, the texture is like chalk, tastes highly artificial, right? So we put all these things together and we put it side by side and we ask ourselves, okay, what are we really strong at? And what is our competitors falling short, right? Where are they falling short? And this is based on actual customer feedback. These are real people writing these things,
Mhm.
right? So we're ingesting hundreds of reviews to get some of these content pillars, we call them. And then the last thing we do is we do a creative messaging analysis. So we take our clients' ads and we kind of lay it all in a grid. And then now we have AI tools that scan the grid and we say, okay, here are like the 5 things we're saying. Then we do the same thing for the competitors, right? Because now we have tools that essentially can look at all the ads that are running and then they'll bucket it out by themes. Then we say, what's the content gap? What are the things they're not saying? Maybe they're not referencing certain benefits to your health. Maybe they're not referencing how you integrate this food product into your daily routine. We call that a content gap. And then we build content to fill in that gap.
Okay.
Yeah. Then when we run our ads and people are scrolling, they're like, oh, I haven't really seen that message before. Or, oh, I was a little concerned about the brand I'm using and they hit on that concern. Maybe I should think about switching. I'm already a customer of this protein bar, and I was thinking about switching. And now I see this other protein bar that addresses all the things I didn't like about my current brand, right? So that's a very kind of tactical way to integrate both AI and
But I can
what
see
I'm
that.
saying.
I can see why that's valuable to people because you're finding the hole, aren't you, to plug, if you like. Let me ask you
Yes,
what. So this is a very specific question about what you've just described. You've talked a lot about using AI, and it's clear that you use it to great effect. Which bit is the human bit in that? Where do your people intervene in those processes? Because a lot of that stuff can be automated. Where do people make the judgments in there?
absolutely. And this is where the talent density
Yeah,
comes in, right?
yeah,
Kind of going back full circle, right? Because this process is really good for looking backwards, right? It's stuff that has already happened, is
yeah.
things that people have already said. Where the human part comes in is looking forward, what we call the taste making. Because the things that go viral on Instagram and TikTok today are not rehashes of what has already happened
Mm.
generally. They are things that are brand new that take off, right? So taste making is a very different skill that AI cannot do, right? It requires you to be quite plugged in, right? If you're scrolling on TikTok and you're constantly adding things to what we call swipe file, right? So basically, all of our team members, when they see something interesting, they send it to this big library. Maybe it's something that isn't viral yet. Maybe it just has like 40 likes or something. And we look at it and we're like, oh, we could see that that could be viral soon, right? That's the taste making aspect. That's the human aspect. And we try and add in that vein, right? And then if we hit it right, then we get a little bit ahead of the curve. So we're not looking backwards. The looking backwards work is important. I'm not going to discount that because it does have great effect and is a great baseline. Like if we're starting with a brand new brands, day one, we're going to look backwards and we're going to create a nice baseline to fill in all the content gaps. But then after we do all that work, the human element comes in. How do we look forward?
Yeah. And let me quickly ask you about that point you've just made, the human piece. Do you simply look for people that can do that? Or are you able to teach people that skill? Because that seems to me to be a really sophisticated thing, that forward-looking piece. I mean, I get the analysis,
Yeah.
I mean, even a short, fat, grey-haired old bloke like me could probably do the analysis of what's happened, given what you've said. It's the taste bit going forward. I mean, how do you develop people so that they can do that? Because that seems to
Yeah.
be interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's two types of people, right? The first type of person is much more rare. It's just built into them,
Right.
right? And we are constantly hunting for those people, but we're not going to bank our business on finding 100 of them. There's just not too many of them out there,
Mm.
right? So we have a process where we're constantly hiring. We're pretty much in perpetual hiring mode, and we're looking for those, highly talented individuals where it's innate, right? But let's say we only find those individuals 5% of the time. What do we do with the other 95%? Well, the other 95% is you take an individual and you talk about training and how we get that consistent result. It's all about frameworks.
Mm.
It's all about framework. So we build a framework saying things like, okay, go in this tool, add in 10 direct competitors, look at the last 7 days, and what ad have they launched in the last week, right? And if you see something interesting, why don't you just flag it, right? Highlight that and check it off. We'll all discuss it together as a team. And then if it looks good to the team, then we're going to propose it as a next batch of content, right? So not necessarily were you born with that innate taste making talent, right? But you can get 80 to 90% of the way there
Yeah,
with just a consistent framework and process.
yeah, you can learn it if you know what to look for. And it's interesting as
Yeah.
well that there's an element of discussing it with a group of people. That's going to be difficult to automate, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Because the best work comes when everyone's aligned and rowing the boat in the same direction, right? Because I talk about brand, there's no way that you can go and have everyone kind of willy-nilly making content in every single direction, right? If it doesn't align with the brand vision and where the brand is going for the next 12 months, then it's going to be, what we call penny wise, pound foolish, right? So we don't want to make short-sighted decisions for performance now. We want to make sure we discuss together and saying, okay, does this fit our long-term vision for this client for the next 12 months? That part, again, I think is difficult to automate, right? Like it's difficult to automate having people who work well together remotely. And that's why such a big part of our hiring process is making sure that uh, they do have that skill to work well together remotely.
Yeah. Let me ask you about the thing that you've just touched on, which is the kind of looking forward piece. I mean,
Hmm.
when you started the business, were the ch I mean, well, first of all, what sort of challenges did you anticipate you'd have to deal with? And did they turn out to be correct? When you started off, you probably thought, I need to do this, I need to raise some money, I need to do X, Y, and Z. Were
Hmm.
those things actually the things that you actually needed to deal with, or were there other things?
Yeah. So when I started the business, I think I had a lot of concerns, like any new business owner.
Yeah.
I would say almost all of those concerns were correct, right? So,
Right,
yeah,
okay.
my first concern was how can we have hiring be scalable and done to a point where we're consistently getting high quality individuals in. That was correct. That turned out to be a struggle, and I wouldn't say we have it figured out now in year 8 of being alive, but we're much, much closer, right? The second part is how can we mimic, and this is the part that is, well, I think we made huge progress, but we're still trying to figure it out. How can we mimic an in-office environment out of office,
Right.
right? Because I previously worked in office. I was in office at an agency, and I was in office at an in-house e-commerce brand. And there's a certain buzz and energy that comes from sitting in a group of cubicles with 50 other people, right? There's a lot of organic conversations that happen, a lot of organic brainstorming, a lot of organic learning, a lot of taps on the shoulder and saying, hey, that looks kind of cool. What's going on over there? And then some great campaign is bred out of that, right? So those organic moments when you're working remotely across a globally distributed team, they need to be manufactured.
And how did you do that? Because that's a really interesting challenge. How did you figure out? I mean, how did you do that?
Yeah, so we have a couple ways to do that. One is that we have something called office hours. So basically, office hours is we have a senior leader. So it could be myself or someone else on the team. They book 1 to 2 hours. That is a virtual room, right? And you can go in there, and what happens in there is up to you, right? You can just work there, camera off, and just kind of listen in passively. Some people do that. You can go in there and say, hey, check this out. I'm working on something cool. You open up your screen, everyone kind of follows along for 5, 10 minutes, and you're organically showing them something new that you learn that could be really interesting. Or a lot of people come to office hours equipped with some sort of sticky problem that they have, right? So if they know that I have an hour or someone else has an hour coming up, they have a sticky problem that has been bothering them for a week or like during the week, they can bring it there and say, hey, Edwin, I've been trying to figure this out and I'm stuck, right? And then I was like, okay, well, great. I will screen share and I'll walk you through this. But because there's so many other people in the room, let's have everyone else watch too, so they can learn by osmosis. So does that capture the in-office experience? Not 100%, but it gets halfway there, right? So then we have people coming saying, wow, I didn't realize I could learn so much just by listening for an hour, like just listening to people talk about interesting problems and solutions for an hour. So that's one way to do it, right? The second way is that we do still organize in-person meetups. Obviously, the logistics are different because we get flights and hotels and meeting rooms and things like that. But we still try to meet individuals of the team at least once a quarter or once every 6 months. And we have these like really intense work sessions together, and we get some of that in-office experience as well.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like a really fun thing to do, actually. If people are all over the place, it must be really interesting bringing people together. Um,
Yeah.
let me ask you, when I talk to CEOs, one of the things that they often talk about is how something happened that reshaped the business. I mean, I call
Mm.
them kind of critical moments. I mean, that may not be the best way to describe it, but have you ever had, or when you look back on the journey, have you had things like that have happened when something critical has happened and as a result, you've perhaps gone in a different direction or it's reshaped the business in some way? I mean, have you had those sorts of things happen on your journey?
Many, many critical moments. Like I feel like those make or break moments come quite often, actually. I think one of the latest ones that happened in the last 3 or 4 years is we had to kind of refashion ourselves from an agency that buys ads to an agency that is a creative agency that creates ads, right? Which is two very different things, right? Because when I started in 2017, it almost didn't feel like it mattered what the ad looked like, as long as you had enough of them, right? They could all look very similar, and as long as it hits like very, very basic foundations of marketing, like pricing, value, some aspects of urgency, then it was probably going to work fairly well, right? And that was the environment that we were born in 2017. But somewhere around 2020, 2021, that stopped working because Meta and Instagram and Google and all the various platforms realized that if people logged into their apps and they saw a bunch of ads that looked the same, it would degrade the experience. People would stop using the app, right? So they changed their algorithm where the ads need to be interesting, authentic, fun, attention seeking, like all these things started to become much more important. So very quickly we had to pivot ourselves and saying, okay, well, two things need to happen that we don't have right now. One is we need everyone in the whole company to be a creative strategist. So before, a creative strategist was a fully separate role, and it was a fairly optional role back then.
That's a big shift.
That's a big shift because now you need people who are less of a statistician, right? And more of a what I was calling the taste making and being able to look backwards and finding the content gaps. That's a different type of person, right? So quickly we needed to put in the infrastructure and the individuals that were more of that creative mindset versus the data crunch, right? And the second big shift is our production capabilities. So all of a sudden, a client might be fine with making 10 ads a month. Now we need 100 ads a month. So that is a profound difference in frameworks, talent, capabilities, production, and tools all that had to be redone on the fly. So thankfully now, and then now again, AI is a big part of it, right? Like if we have a great concept that worked really well, we could use AI to create 10 other concepts similar to that and test 10 different types of messaging, right? So now we're like fully fledged. Creative strategy is the heartbeat of the company, and creative production is almost like a factory line, right? Like we can say, I want 40 ads, you press a button and 40 get created, and then off you go to the races.
Yeah, and I guess that gives you a really interesting competitive edge, doesn't it? Because the creative stuff is the stuff that's going to be very difficult for AI to replicate.
Absolutely. I think that's the thing is that what we want to do is we want to make it so there's always a moat between us and AI, right? We want to maximize the things that cannot be replaced by machines. And that's kind of the core tenet of what some of our goals for all of last year and for this year and probably the years upcoming.
Let me ask you another question that sort of relates to the way the business has developed. I mean, I was talking to somebody the other day they were very clear about their values, the things they felt were important, the things they prioritized. And it became clear that those values had completely shaped the way the business worked. I mean, is that
Yeah,
true in your situation? Has that, if you like, have your values driven the business model? I mean, is that happening here?
absolutely. I think pretty much. Well, there's probably a couple of schools of thought, right? One is absolutely that is probably one of the most important things that you can do, right? Is to make sure that your company is value oriented, right? Because how I describe this is your value and culture is the rope that the team hangs on to. Okay. So if the rope is strong and your value and culture is strong,
Mm.
inevitably a hurricane is going to come along. And you want it so strong that when they hold on to that rope, everyone stays, right? They don't get blown away.
Mm.
Now, if you have a weak sense of value and culture, people get blown all over the place,
Yeah.
right? So that's number one. It's like, I think it's super critically important, right? And then certainly we have, our six core principles, right? Like one of which is you're self-motivated for growth. I think that's probably the most important one. You're self-motivated for growth, right? Meaning that you wake up every day wanting to be better. If you don't have that value, then you're probably not the right fit here, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I think a lot of companies talk about their values, and it's probably in a nice slide somewhere, right, in their company presentation, but it's very different to practice it
Yeah.
in the day to day. And then how I judge that, and this is why I say to the team probably ad nauseum, is the value and culture of a company is not in the perks, right? A lot of people when I interview people, they talk about value and culture. They ask me about perks. They ask me about game day or a night out at the pub, right? But really, culture is how do people respond to each other when stuff gets really hard?
Mm.
How do people address conflict on a day to day? How do people address disagreement? Why are certain people let go, even if their performance is exceptional? That's culture to me,
Mm.
right? So if you are someone who is exceptionally talented, but you work poorly with teammates, then you violated one of the values and you will probably be on your way out, right? Whereas an individual who is maybe not as experienced and they don't have a lot of skills, but they want growth, they're extremely hardworking, they're a great teammate, they get stuff done, they are really open to constructive feedback and they take it extremely well. We're going to keep investing in that person
Mm.
because they're more of a representation of the cultural rope that we have at the
And they're
company.
more of an asset in the long run, aren't they?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think something that's important as business owners, you always need a 30-year timeline, right? So you kind of look at someone, it's like, well, what could they be in 5, 10, 15 years, right? And then what is the infrastructure we need to keep them for 5, 10, 15 years, right? So I think that is like a huge part of the calculation when it comes down to company culture and how we strive to practice and improve upon it every day.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me ask you about your role as the CEO. CEO's role, in my view, is absolutely critical. It's probably the most crucial job in the business. And it has to do a number of really interesting things. I mean, one of the things that I think is really interesting is, and this is particularly pertinent now, the job of the CEO is to kind of navigate through all the uncertainty. And there's a lot of uncertainty at the moment. Things are evolving really quickly. Customer expectations are changing rapidly. There's huge amounts of uncertainty. I mean, what's your take on that kind of navigation process? How you navigate the business through that
Mm.
uncertainty? I mean, what's your feelings about that?
Yeah. So I think something that helps keep me grounded is as the CEO, I really have only 3 to 4 roles. This is kind of what I tell myself because it's very easy to be overwhelmed and to lose
Yeah.
track of what's important, right? And really, those 3 to 4 roles is, number one is cash flow, right? Making sure we're making more money in than what's going out, right? So how I navigate that with, in terms of uncertainty is fairly simple. I always keep 6 to 12 months of operational expenses saved up, right? So we can survive for 6 to 12 months with, dropping or even no revenue. And that keeps the company stable, right? And then also making sure that every month we're reviewing cash flow, we're optimizing cash flow, right? So that's number one. Number two is making sure that we're always, as a CEO, that most of my calendar is dedicated toward growth. Like there is some sort of revenue generating, either if it's short term or long term, revenue generating activity that I'm spending my time on, that we're exploring new verticals, we're exploring new services, we're exploring new partnerships. As long as the majority of my time is spent on that, then we're probably going to help navigate uncertainty because we're always kind of turning over rocks and seeing what's underneath, right? And a lot of our most successful initiatives have been through that sort of hunt and find and sniffing around for opportunities, right? Third, finding and retaining the best talent. That is definitely a CEO's job, right? I think personally, I want to be involved in recruiting from employee one to employee 100. That's my goal. I want to be personally involved, right? Basically, I want to know every single head that's coming into the company personally, right? And this way, you keep that cultural rope strong because you're the gatekeeper at the end of the day. And then the fourth most important core duty for me is I feel like that I am the emotional engine. I set the tone. So if I see that, maybe this week was lackadaisical, then next Monday on the meeting, I'm gonna change the tone for the week. If I see that maybe for a week or two, we're not coming up with new ideas for a client, I will go into a meeting and I will inject uh, an aura of change. I'm going to change something up dramatically, right? And then because the team is so good at what they do, they usually get a sniff of that and then they take it and run with it, right? But I think it's very important to be the emotional heartbeat of the company. If you have a sense of urgency, everyone else has a sense of urgency.
Mm.
If the CEO is lackadaisical, everyone's going to be lackadaisical.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I try to focus on those four things that really helps deal with any sort of uncertainty because no matter what the environment is, those four things will help you be resilient to
Yeah.
what is happening.
I mean, I think your point about the emotional heart of the business, injecting urgency or staying upbeat or whatever. I mean, I think that's a really interesting point actually, because that goes to the core of leadership, really, doesn't it? Let me ask you about one other thing that relates to the CEO's role. I mean, I don't know how you feel about it. I mean, there's a billion things that you could do. One of the challenges, I mean, you've outlined the four things that you focus on. I mean, one of the challenges is not to get distracted by 101 other things. I mean, there's a famous saying from somebody, strategy is mainly about what you don't do. How do you keep yourself from being distracted by all the kind of shiny things that you could get involved with? Do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So how I manage my time, well, let's start from the top. Like how I manage a year is we usually have one very big goal or initiative per quarter, right? Because that is the one shiny object we're allowed as a team to focus on for next 3 months, right? And the company kind of orients itself to figuring that piece out collectively as a group, right? So I think what a lot of CEOs do in my feedback with my team is They come in, it's January 1st. They put out a big presentation. Hey, 2026 is going to be huge. We're going to do, these 8 massive things. And then, by the time December comes around, we sort of half-heartedly did 2 and we forgot about 2. And, so what I've been trying to do is we do one big project per quarter and everything else is bonus, right? And that sort of mantra is now distilled to my day to day. So every day I try to do one thing that's really big that's connected to that goal, right? And everything else is bonus. But that's the first thing I get out of the way. That's the first thing I get out of the way, right? And everything else I will consider a bonus,
So what
right?
you're saying, let me just clarify. What you're saying is you do less better. Is that
I
fair?
do less better. I do less better. And then everything else is a bonus. So then I don't have to be, a lot of CEOs, they wake up and they write their to-do list and there's like 19 things on it. They do 6 things, right? And at the end of the night, they look at it and they get highly discouraged because they're like, "Oh, I didn't finish the other 13." But really, 6 is amazing. If
Yeah.
they're all big things, that's amazing progress for one day, right? But
I'd be
how I
happy
approach it,
with that done.
yeah,
I'm happy
I'll
with
be ecstatic. I'll be
yeah.
ecstatic. But what I do is the opposite. I just write one thing, and then once I do it, I cross it off. Everything else is a bonus. So I might do that one thing, and I have some extra time. I'll do the other 2, and I'll look at it and be like, "Oh, I did a great job today. I'm gonna try to do that again tomorrow." So that's a more for me. That's more daily positive reinforcement. And it prevents me from being discouraged, right? And then the other thing too is that I often I don't have you ever heard about the 4 quadrants of time management?
No, tell me.
Okay, so if you draw a square and you divide that square into 4 other squares, right? And you sort of write on the top urgent, and then you write on the left important,
Okay.
right? So I think CEOs are really good at things that are urgent and important, right? Oh, client's about to leave. Obviously, you're gonna drop everything you're doing, go to that square, and then I'm gonna prevent the churn. Urgent and important will always get done. I think where CEOs tend to have their time get muddied up is they don't spend the time in the quadrant that says important, not urgent.
Yeah.
That's where the highest value comes from. Well, maybe you've been putting off that team meeting. Maybe you've been putting off sitting down and really building that new framework, right? It's not urgent, but it's incredibly important. And there's probably not enough time invested there. And probably too much time invested in something that is urgent and not important, right? So if it's something urgent, but someone else can deal with it, then you shouldn't be dealing with that because then it'll suck up too much time from important and not urgent. You should be spending the majority of your time in that. And don't worry about urgent and important. It just automatically gets done, right? Taxes, urgent and important, has a hard due date. It's got to get done no matter what, right? So don't just execute and don't worry about it. Really worry about the urgent and not important. I think it's the same thing for marriage. It's the things that are
Doesn't sound very romantic putting it that way.
yeah. Well, I think I had a really good mentor that was talking to me about marriage. And he said the things in that square is the difference between getting divorce papers and not,
Yeah. That's a
right?
very good point, actually. That is a very
Yeah.
good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't want to put off the important stuff.
Yeah. You don't want to put off date night. It's easy to put off,
Yeah.
right? Because it doesn't seem urgent, but it is very important. So you need to invest there.
Yeah. Let me ask you another thing about, and this kind of relates to the world that you're in. It's one of the reasons I'm
Mm.
interested. Compared to when I started in business 40 years ago, people are, everyone is building a business in the what I call the age of social media. And what I
Mm.
mean by that is that you're constantly scrutinized. There's always people looking at you in one form or another. Your
Mm.
people can go and say anything they want on LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram or whatever. So,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a very different experience. Building a business in the modern age is very different to the way it was 30, 40 years ago. How do you
Yeah.
feel about building a business in a situation where your clients could go and say anything, your staff, you can't, some of those things are very difficult to control, aren't they? But what are your
Mm.
feelings about that experience?
I think I like to simplify things. I can't control it, so I don't worry about it. What
Mm.
I can control is acting with integrity and treating people like how I want to be treated, then more likely than not, if they say something, it's going to be nice. That's it. I keep it very simple. I don't lose sleep over that.
No, and that's
You're,
I think a very wise words actually, because you're absolutely right. I mean, you can't do anything about it, so
yeah,
there's not a lot of point worrying about things that you can't control, is there? So, let me
yeah.
ask you specifically about you. I mean, when I talk to CEOs, they pretty much all describe building a business as like riding a roller coaster. You know, there are really good,
Mm,
really bad days, and there's everything in between.
absolutely.
What is it that gets you out of bed every day? Willing, motivated, engaged to kind of ride that roller coaster. I mean, what is it about this specifically that motivates you?
One word, contribution. Contribution. So I wake up and the first question I ask myself, probably in most days, is what can I contribute to individuals that are in my daily life? So that would be my family, my wife and children. What can I contribute to them? It would be our clients. What can we contribute to their business and what value can we add? And to the team, what contribution are we making to their careers and what type of growth are we driving for them? So win or lose, because you're going to lose a lot, right? You're
Yeah.
not going to win every day. Win or lose, contribution you can control. You can control contribution. So even if we have a losing day, as long as someone has felt contributed to, then that day was a success in my eyes. And you stack enough contribution, it always comes full circle. It comes back to you. So I think that is I like to try to keep things simple, right? So I like to wake up and say, what can I do to contribute to everyone that I talk to today and have a positive, lasting impression?
Yeah. And I mean, is that a factor, do you think, in why the business has been so successful? I mean, Jetfuel Agency is very successful globally. I mean, is that one of the factors that has contributed to the success, do you think, or are there other things?
I think that is a huge factor. I think there's a huge factor, an element of luck, being in the right place, right time. But
Mm.
I also think that you, to a certain extent, as an individual, you manufacture luck, right? The more activity you do, the more you stir up the surface of the lake, the more stuff floats to the top, right? So I think that's a factor. I think, and you know what? I think one of the most important factors is the most important factor is simply not giving up. Is simply staying alive and
Don't quit.
outlasting, yeah, outlasting your competition, right? I think that's probably the most important factor is outlasting the competition, right? I like to joke with some of our senior team that we're kind of like cockroaches. Like we've been around for 400 million years. We survived the age of the dinosaurs. We could survive a nuclear bomb. As long, the cockroaches don't quit. So we should take inspiration from them.
Yeah, no, that's a very interesting point, actually. I had somebody else come on the podcast a while ago who described their business as a cockroach rather than the unicorn.
Yeah.
They felt they would always survive. They may not be billionaires, but they're always going to survive. Very
So
interesting sort of mindset, really. And were there on the journey that you've been on, have there been critical moments that have shaped? I mean, you talked about things that have shaped the business. Have there been things that have shaped you as the CEO?
yeah, absolutely. That's why I'm in business because business has been in my life one of the greatest accelerants of personal growth. I mean, you're gonna find out real quick what
Yeah.
your deficiencies are in business. Like that is exposed. There's no running from it, right? So one of the reasons why I started business is I wanted to see A, if I can handle it, and then B, if I could handle it, what type of person would I become? So there's a lot of critical moments where I would say that it was easy to take the easy way out, but I generally didn't. Right? I think the hardest choice to make is probably almost always a better choice, is what it winds up being. Right? So that is A. B, I think one of the biggest things I've learned is patience. It's patience, right? Because I was a very impatient person, but it took me a while to figure out that, maybe some of the best things I ever came out of business took 1, 2, or 3 years of work
Mm.
to get to. right? And that has made me more patient as an individual. And the third is it has really made me quite stoic, right? So if you follow any of the Greek philosophers or
Yep.
Roman philosophers that were into Stoicism, they're all about thinking about what you can control and sort of not being emotionally swayed by what you can't control. And I think without that, most people that would start a business, they'll go nuts because there's so much stuff you can't control every day,
Yeah.
right? So I think that's a huge aspect of it. And then last but not least is I think the biggest thing is aligning myself with the idea of contribution, right? And how can I maximize and grow my contribution? And again, that has really permeated through every facet of my life moving forward.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing that comes across from you when we've spoken in the past is I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, but I get the sense that you really enjoy it. I mean, that it's fun. Is that fair?
It's very fun. It's extremely fun. I wouldn't do it if it wasn't fun. Now, are there moments where it's not fun? Certainly,
Yeah.
certainly, just a lot of moments that are not fun. But then when you look back on it, right? When you look back on it, I think almost all the difficult moments were positive in some way, shape, or form in the long run. If you take the 5, 10, 15 year vision route, right? Because you learn more from failure than success. Success is a terrible teacher.
Mm.
Success is a terrible teacher. So I think in the sense that I'm forced to grow every day, and in the sense that business is a playground that really has almost no rules,
Yeah.
right? Obviously you have to follow certain rules legally, etc. But in your strategy, there's complete freedom what you have to do and what you can experiment with, right? I think all of that is at the end of the day very, very fun.
Yeah. Yeah. No, like you, I share that. I mean, I've always enjoyed being in business. I think it's one of the most interesting things to do actually to try and build a business. I mean, like you said, it's not easy, but it's good fun and actually I think very rewarding. Actually, not just financially, but personally very rewarding. Let me ask you one final question before we wind up. I mean, is there any, if you were to offer one bit of advice, perhaps to your younger self, knowing what you know now, or perhaps to a rookie CEO, what would that piece of advice be?
Yeah, I would say if I was talking to my younger self, I would say that the most important thing you can do is to be extremely, extremely even keeled and know that whatever emotions you're feeling as a leader of the company, it will always trickle down.
Mm.
So if you're frantic, everyone be frantic. If you're stressed, everyone will be stressed. If you're upbeat, everyone will be upbeat. So I think that's probably the most important lesson that I wish I learned earlier.
Mm.
I would say in my early years as someone who's leading a company, and obviously there's much to learn there, but I think that's probably one of the biggest lessons that I would teach.
Yeah. I mean, Edwin, what a great piece of advice to end on. I mean, thank you for that. I mean, it's a really good point that actually, and it kind of relates to your point earlier on about being the emotional center of the business, doesn't it? Really, that sort of relates to that. If you're stable and sensible and, focused and all the rest of it, it will definitely influence other people. So I think that's really good advice. Edwin,
100%.
thank you for making a bit of time. What a great story. What a great proposition you've developed, great business. And I mean, I really appreciate you making time to come and talk to us about it. Yeah, sounds great fun as well. So,
Yeah, I had a blast. Thank you so much, Paul. I appreciate it.
cheers, Edwin. Bye bye.
Bye.